Get used to seeing me like this, no makeup, because the only time that I have to make these videos is the time after I go to work and then I go to the gym and then I take a shower after I go to the gym. So I'm not putting on a full face of makeup. Today we're going to talk about my favorite books, and like the video I did last year about my favorite albums, these books aren't necessarily the best books ever written, but they're books that have meant a lot to me over time and that I took a lot of time reading and just devouring and loving. And some of them I've read multiple times, some of them I've only read once. A couple of these books I don't actually have physical copies of, so I'll just insert a picture of the thingy here. There's also a video that I made like in 2011 that was about my favorite books, and some of these books are the same and some of them are different, and you can go ahead and watch that if you want. I'll leave it in the I'll just leave it up here. The first book is Memoirs of a Geisha. This book then pairs with one of my favorite movies, which is Memoirs of a Geisha. I read this book in 8th grade, which, knowing what's in this book, not necessarily, I don't know if I was mature enough to read it then. I probably was, but I found myself to be quite advanced in reading this. Sayuri as a character is super complex. She goes through a lot of stages in her life in this book, some which the movie does not show, particularly in the beginning and end of the book, where she is in her life and everything that she's gone through. It paints a really interesting image of Japan during World War II and prior to World War II. I have some issues, obviously, with it being written by a white man, because it is a story about being a woman, but I do, and a Japanese woman at that, but I don't know, it's just a book that's really stuck with me throughout my life. One of the ones I need to read again. Because I'm sure, since I did read it like in 2006, like more than 10 years ago, I'm sure I could pick up a lot more, and it might not be my favorite book anymore, but we'll see. I'll stick with ones that I haven't read in a while. This book I read in high school, but in like 9th grade. Was it 9th grade? No, it was 10th grade. I read this book in 10th grade. I actually stole it from my 10th grade AP World History teacher. Because why not? It was one of the books he just had in his classroom and I said, I want to read this, and then I just never gave it back. This is an interesting book because you read it and you think it's going to be about history, and then it sort of is, but then it's also about vampires. So it mixes like fantasy and history and things that I love, and it also has a romance, and I like a romance in a book. And this book took me like over a year to read. I read it very slowly, but I remember when I finished it being like, oh my god, I love this book. And again, it has stuck with me. Next book is YouTube by Jean Burgess and Joshua Green. This book was written in 2009, so you can assume and know that this book is not necessarily up to date in the YouTube world. But if you like YouTube, if you want to understand YouTube, if you're interested in the history or the cultural phenomenon that is YouTube, this is a great book to read. It's really short, as you can see, but really thorough. I have messaged one of the authors on Twitter and they did let me know that they are updating this book, though as we all know, YouTube changes so fast that who even knows what the next book will have at all. It's one of my favorites because it's about YouTube, and you all know me. So the funny thing about this book is that every time I was at the library, I would see this book and be like, that looks interesting, and I would read the back, I would read this blurb, and then I would put it back because I was like, I don't want to read it. And then I did finally read it, and it became my life for like a good 3 or 4 years. All of my books, except for the final one, are, is this one? Yes. Signed by the author. The final one, unfortunately, the author passed away, before the book came out. So the book came out, or yeah, the book came out after he passed. But, he was an amazing man. I emailed with him, I talked on the phone with him, I'm friends with his wife on Facebook. And I joined a forum back in the day when forums were a thing. And I met all of these amazing girls who looked up to Jackie as a character. Essentially, Bloody Jack is about a girl named Mary who grows up in the slums of London and decides to join the Royal Navy in the beginning of the 1800s. And then you follow her life. She's a strong woman. The entire series is built on the backbone of naval and folk songs. And it is just... I have an entire playlist on Spotify called I think it's called Jackie Faber, and it's all the songs that are in the books, and they're all, you know, like Irish, Scottish folk tunes, and they're, I just have a lot of emotional connection with this. Next book is Crown Duel. This is a romance, but it's also about like court and war and navigating a space which is unfamiliar to the protagonist, and again, female main character. Actually, I'm now just realizing that all of my favorite books have female main characters, which is great. And obviously I was looking for people to look up to and model myself after when I was growing up, because all of these books, with the exception of YouTube, are books that I read in high school or in middle school, and so very transformative to me being me. But this was originally published in two books, Crown Duel and Court Duel, but they published it as one under the title of Crown Duel. It's by Sherwood Smith, who also has a ton of other fantasy books that I've actually never read. I've only ever read this series. There's a lot of world building in this. All the characters are very unique. And it's a fantasy romance, essentially. That is a theme I like to read because it's escapism. The final book is a book I don't have with me, which is Stargirl. Stargirl is a book about a weird girl who has funky parents, and she does weird things and moves to a new city, and it's actually in the person of the man. So I guess this one isn't necessarily a female protagonist, but she's like the focus of the story, and it's told through the eyes of this boy who meets her and is changed through knowing her. I think she definitely has a little bit of the pixie dream girl stereotype, but I really liked her as a person for being unique and not being afraid of who she was. And the story itself is super unique. And then there's a second book called Love Stargirl, which is she writes letters to him later on in life. Some of these books are written for a adult audience, but Stargirl is definitely one of the ones that's written for a YA audience. It's one of those books that I was bawling while reading it. And I, again, haven't read it in a while, but I'm sure that now as like an adult reading it, I'm gonna cry even more. I don't cry a lot when I read books, but that was one of the ones that made me cry. So, what are your favorite books? Other than comments about the books that I love and that are my favorite, what are your favorite books? What should I read? You can pick up all these books at your local hometown bookstore or the library. Support libraries, support local bookstores, and that is it. I'll see y'all tomorrow.